Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 16.5.1 released today on all iOS 16 supported devices. iOS 16.5.1 is out to everyone around the world at the same time and is available for iPhone 8, 8 Plus, iPhone 10, all the way up to iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. Now this is a fairly small update, as you can see here at 283 megabytes. It was about the same size on all the devices you see here. And Apple also released a ton of other updates: iPadOS 16.5.1, watchOS 9.5.2, macOS Ventura 13.4.1, and then a bunch of older updates for older devices, such as iOS 15.7.7 and more. Now, if you're not seeing this update and you're actually a beta tester, you won't have this if you're on iOS 16.6 or iOS 17. You'll have to be on iOS 16.5 or earlier in order to see this. If you go to General, Software Update, and you have the beta updates turned on and you have one of the newer versions, you won't see it because you're on a newer version. Let's go ahead and take a look at the build number, and then we'll talk about what's new. So we'll go to Settings, then we'll go to General, then About, and as you can see, the build number is 20F75. This particular update fixes some issues and also has security updates. Now, the first thing is there is no new modem update in iOS 16.5.1. As far as features, well, most of those are left for iOS 16.6 and iOS 17. However, Apple did fix an issue specifically for this update, and that has to do with the Lightning to USB 3 connector. So this connector was having an issue before where it wouldn't charge connected devices properly. That's now been resolved. So if you're plugging this into your iPhone, you're plugging it into a camera, this will now work properly. That's what they've fixed with this update. They've also updated the security updates as well. So if we go into Safari here, you'll see if we scroll down under security updates, we already have iOS 16.5.1 and all of the other updates they've released today. There's a ton of them, including watchOS 8.8.1 as well. So if we go into this update and scroll down, you'll see that there's two updates, specifically for the kernel and WebKit. The kernel is the underlying code that runs the OS, and you'll see the impact was an app may be able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges. Apple is aware of a report that this issue may have been actively exploited against versions of iOS released before iOS 15.7. To fix it, an integer overflow was addressed with improved input validation. They've also fixed an issue with WebKit. That's what runs basically Safari, and it says the impact was processing maliciously crafted web content may lead to arbitrary code execution. Apple is aware of a report that this issue may have been actively exploited. To fix it, a type confusion issue was addressed with improved checks. So those are the two major security updates in this. As far as additional fixes, well, in this update, as far as notifications, I haven't noticed any difference as far as that goes, with notifications being more responsive and being less glitchy. However, they are still an issue on iOS 17 as well. So hopefully they fix it with that. Apple also has not mentioned fixes for anything to do with camera, where maybe some of the overall processing is a little different with HDR photos and more. So none of that has been addressed. This is just to fix the issues I mentioned before. And so if you're wondering what the overall battery life is like on this, the battery life will take a few days to measure. Hopefully it's a little bit better, as typically after the recent iOS updates come out, it gets a little bit worse over time. This is my phone that I don't use 100% of the time. I have to have a bunch of different ones just for all of the different updates. But you'll see we're at 100% battery health on this 14 Pro Max. Also, overall battery life, again, it will take a few days. We'll have a follow-up later on talking about battery life this weekend, as it takes a few days to know if it's any better or worse. As far as performance, I would not expect any difference whatsoever, but everything so far, as far as ProMotion and everything else, is smooth and fast. And as far as the overall heat of the device, it was a little warm after reboot. That's typical, as it's processing in the background, indexing, and more. So give it a couple days usually, and it will be normal. Now, as far as if you should install iOS 16.5.1, I would say absolutely for the security